with privilege to introduce the lady who is the prime induction of these events. She works her soul out, and that is...
What is that, Bill?
Her. Which you all know. Just a couple of words, this bell was made in 1939 and it's an ARP bell. It sounds awful. So there you are, hand over to our gracious lady.
This is the finale, effectively, of our 4-year Women's Land Army project, so enjoy! That's what it's all about. Too many people have been involved. I couldn't possibly thank them all. I'll be here until the dance starts tonight. So consider yourself thanked. You know who you are. And one or two people, particularly in the last couple of weeks, have given me enormous moral support. But I do have to acknowledge our funders. The project as a whole was supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund and players of the National Lottery, so obviously we're very grateful to them, and also to Charlotte and the Staffordshire County Council, who gave us some funding right at the start of the project.
quite important, these two pictures in some respects, because that's the 1946 Land Army armlet that they were given for about 6 years service, which is mine from downstairs. You can have a look at the original one, and this signifies part of the Timber Corps as well, which is quite often mistaken sometimes as well, and there is a crossover between the sort of military side of it, the male side of it, but they did have the crossed axes as a logo as well. Some of you might be aware that they had the Timber Corps and the fir tree, so it was a slightly different one. So that's where we're at. So most of you will probably recognise this, it's the Land Army uniform, and it's quite a significant one. It tends to be, like you've got on there, it tends to be green and browny colours, sort of military looking. You've got the shoes, quite often the brogues, and a lot of those are actually made not a million miles away, so Northamptonshire and Staffordshire areas where some of the clothing factories were, some of the shoes were actually made in this particular area. So you see the cut-off knee trousers there, the corduroys. You get some slightly later ones as well, which look a little bit more military, so they're made out of the more the military type of clothing as well, so they tended to come after the war. So you can see the lady with the armlet on there, and the hats as well. It's a very typical uniform, if you like.
This is Matt. He's the events manager or organiser at the Crescent in Buxton, and he organised some fabulous events. And hopefully he's going to go find himself a girlfriend in a minute. Where are they?
Oh, I don't know, we're really getting the Russians.
This is an original RAF uniform. Belongs to Mr. John Ritter. We've got 2 or 3 uniforms, and I think this dress belongs to another one, but every one of them. It's typical. It's issued during World War II. Of course, it's a kit bag. It's got his sandwiches in there, and it's got his coupons. We've still got ration books. Okay, can we get girls, please? You do twice. This is Tilly. Tilly is an actress, and she modelled for 3 years. She originates from Ashford. Now this is a really beautiful moss-grey black and white dress, and it was John Hodson's. It was vicar at Olstonfield when I moved there in 1978, and his father was a Royal Navy sea captain, and in 1944 they docked in New York. And he lived to be over 100, and he was such a lovely man. He went into Bloomingdale's, and he bought this dress for his wife. It's crepe again, isn't it super? And because it was American, they actually got the side zips, not the hooks and eyes. And we had to wait until the new look to get the metal zip. Look at that fabulous hat she's wearing. She's got those fantastic hair. Beautiful shoes. I found those in a town in Devon. They were in an antique shop. I had to scramble on the floor to find the other one. I think of the town in it. It's got very tall high street. And that's a 1940s bag she's carrying. But that is a really lovely dress. You can wear that today. And of course, he didn't need a coupon, because in America they never used clothes coupons. They didn't really go without a short, not like in British. Thank you, Tilly. Thank you.
Today is really celebrating the end of a 4-year Heritage Lottery funded project on the Women's Land Army in Leek and the Moorlands. So it began 4 years ago. It should have been a 2-year project actually, but COVID interrupted. So we had a 2-year extension because we couldn't do much during COVID. I got involved with Borderland Voices in 2003 when I was asked to write the introduction for book on local history. I met the lady then, who was a founder member of Borderland Voices. I then became a committee member and then a trustee, and I'm now chair of trustees of Borderland Voices, which is the home to the Women's Land Army story. I think in the year 2000, a lady and a woman called Sheena Barnes, I can't remember the other woman's name, but Sheena Barnes, this woman won some money and a literary prize, I think, and she wanted to do something useful with it in Leek and with mental health issues, and she set up Borderland Voices, which is a mental health wellbeing charity, and that was 25 years ago, and it's still going strong. Very small organisation, but does lots of things. It does arts and creative writing and poetry classes for people who need some support for mental health and well-being in the Leek and the Staffordshire Moorlands. Well, I'm a historian. That's my job. So by profession, I used to be the head of a history department at Staffordshire University. So I ran the history department when I was approached to do that. So that was my role and why I was asked to write the introduction. And really, the reason I got involved with the Women's Land Army project, it seemed an obvious thing for me to do some history. So over the last 4 years, I've given about 8 different talks to groups in Cheshire and Derbyshire and Staffordshire on the Women's Land Army, the general history, the regional history, and then the local history. So that's what I've done. Well, I think for me, and thinking about Borderland Voices, it's a two-pronged thing, really. It's as much about Borderland Voices as it is about the Women's Land Army. Because for Borderland Voices, their creative work in art and writing and poetry has a focus, it needs a focus. And the Women's Land Army is such a fantastic story for the region, for the area, for its own sense of identity for its past. That to engage local people in their local past and in artwork and poetry to relive it, recreate it, refresh it. So it's a project about Borderland Voices, and of course for the Women's Land Army, it's unearthing a past that most people in Leek knew nothing about. So it's sort of it's good for the Women's Land Army, good for Borderland Voices. Well, I think some of the aims, and when you look at the support network, certainly the people in Borderland Voices who meet weekly, especially through COVID actually, which was completely unforeseen, but nevertheless important. A lot of people through COVID were isolated, were fearful, were anxious, and times that by 10 for Borderland Voices people. It was a common thread, a common bond. So we did Zooms with them, we talked to them on the phone. It brought them together as a sense of unity. COVID was 10 times, but generally speaking, for people of like minds who feel isolated and are anxious and do have some sort of issues about anxiety and well-being, having a focus on a project takes the emphasis from you and allows you to mix and become more of a community. So for me, that's what Borderland Voices does. This country would not have won the war without the thousands and thousands of women who actually grew food to feed the soldiers, to feed the animals, to feed the population. Because if you don't have food, then you don't have an army and you don't have a civilian community that can, all completely overlooked by the government. I mean, the Women's Land Army weren't recognised until about 20 years ago. Until 20 years ago, very few people had heard of the Women's Land Army. There is now a commemorative statue at the National Arboretum at Alrewas. That took some getting. But actually the role of women on the land, who took over the land when the men went to war, was crucial to the success. And Churchill actually acknowledges that without the women, to feed the men, to feed the horses, to cut down the timber and the trees which built the ships, we wouldn't be able to prosecute a war, and certainly not a successful one.
I had some discussions with various people, and we realised that we didn't know much about the history of the Women's Land Army in this area, and it's not it's not a thing which is particularly well known anyway. And obviously, the people who were directly involved in it, there are fewer and fewer of them, and even those who are indirectly involved as sort of sons, daughters, what have you, are getting older. So it seemed an opportune time to record it. But our focus as an organisation, we're a charity which does arts for health and mental well-being activities. So our focus was always going to be looking at it in a creative way, which means that we were going to do creative writing, expressive art. We were going to work not only with our participants, but also with the general public and young people. And we got permission and funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund literally as we went into the first COVID lockdown, to the extent that I actually had to throw the documentation over a wall to my chair of trustees to get them countersigned and sent off. It was literally, it happened then. So the first 2 years of the project, it should have been a 2-year project. It ended up as a 4-year one. The first 2 years were obviously severely impacted by the pandemic. And many of the things that we planned to do couldn't be done because we'd planned lots of sort of public engagement and so on. So obviously all of us sitting at home in our front rooms couldn't do that. But Borderland Voices continued its creative writing group on Zoom. So that became a very important part of what we did. We also sent out art packs. And the final exhibition and booklet actually include quite a lot of the writing which was done during that period, because it seemed to be a very important historical document about what it was like to live through a pandemic. And we've sort of tried to relate that to what it might have been like as a land girl, or indeed anybody in this country living through, a Second World War. So once lockdowns began to ease, we started piggybacking on other people's activities, and we were generally sort of gradually able to do more activities. In the interval, the high school, who had been very supportive of our efforts and wanted to work with us, sadly went into special measures, so weren't in a position to engage. But fortunately, we found a primary school in Endon who were very keen, so we've worked with them, and we've worked with Brownies and Guides. So at least we have been able to engage with young people, and also at things like family fun days, where we've done family activities like making peg dolls. It's sort of a very traditional craft that, I remember doing as a child, sort of shortly after the end of the war. So trying to get people to think back to, how much simpler life was then. So yes, we've accumulated an enormous amount of artwork, written work, reminiscence work, because Catherine, who we engaged at the beginning of the project, was able, even during lockdown, because we sent out press releases and things, she made contact with various people and was able to do telephone conversations with them. So we've got reminiscences from many people in the Moorlands area who had some sort of connection with, the Women's Land Army, whether that was because they had relations or because they were on a farm where the farm had a land girl, working there. And the other thing that actually has come out of the project is that this particular area seems to have a lot of hidden land girls, in a sense. There were many people who were daughters of farms, and dad or granddad said, well, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to volunteer to work on munitions or whatever. You're staying here because we need you on the farm. So, but they never got any recognition, unlike Land Army girls who eventually got some recognition. So there was a certain amount of sort of, well, nobody ever recognised my input.
When I first came to Leek, I did need quite a bit of help with mental health well-being. And Borderlands was actually prescribed to me by my doctor, and it was the best move that the doctor's ever made, better than any pills. It really was the first step in me getting better from where had been not a brilliant position. And I've since gone on to be an active member of Borderland Voices and now a trustee of Borderland Voices. I've come in the last few weeks, really. Andy had, and other people had really, it was their idea. So I've come in in the last few weeks to help, just help organise it, keep it running on the day. So it's been so much more successful than you could ever have dreamed. Obviously, I'm totally responsible for the weather. That's what I organised. I was thinking about this last night, for example, that there's 40 celebration. There's often there's some flag waving often and fancy speeches. But actually, if you think about the spirit of the 1940s, what it meant both on the home front and then after the war, it was about people helping each other and not wanting praise or anything like that, but actually just helping each other in a sort of communal way. And that really is what Borderlands is about, and I think perhaps behind all the costumes, what this day is about. And some fun too, I hope.
Well, we both go to an organisation called Borderland Voices, and it's a creative writing group, and it helps people with their mental health. There's also art classes as well, and we got the grant for Andy, Andy Collins. She runs it, and she got the grant. It's the Lottery Fund to do a project on the Women's Land Army. We did all research on it, and we also did some writing on it. And I think it was in March of last year. We were here at the Foxlow, and I read some of my writing out and to an audience, and some other members did. We read out a pieces of the research that we'd done about the Land Army girls that they worked with on the farms, also the lumber jails, obviously that worked putting the trees down, how hard they worked, how hard it was for them to be away from the family.
Yeah, yeah, we've done a lot of work. We've put in lots of hours. We've done many things. We've visited loads of places to do with the World War I and II.
Yeah.
But, we were explaining the whole thing about it. World War II. What the soldiers did. The enemy's dead. And just an amazing thing, really. My family, we're all together. And my aunties were in the. They did they worked on the farms. They worked on the ammunitions, and then another one worked on the communication. So it's one thing that you start off with something simple and it ends up opening up loads of things. and you realise that you sort of got to see like history.
Yeah,
And then so it's a very high life, really.
it was. Yeah, very enjoyable.
Very enjoyable.
So I'm here sort of representing a charity called Outside, who have been supporting the Polish Leek connection in Leek. And there's an exhibition going on in Nilsson, and as part of that we're sort of introducing some Polish craft activities. I'm a puppeteer and a crafter, and I make a lot of shadow puppets, so I work with paper quite a lot. So I've been looking at sort of traditional Polish folk art and the paper cutting skills and things like that. So I've been introducing that a little bit today. So I've had lots of families that have come and engaged in the activity, and actually what I found is that a lot of them are Polish speakers, and so they're with a first language Polish parent, and then the kids are sort of bilingual. But the whole I had 3 different families, and all of them were talking to each other in Polish. There was someone that was English that was talking Polish, and it's really nice to see it all sort of here together. It's been really nice. There's so much that goes on, and there's so many different little pockets of things. So a day like this where there's crafters, there's makers, there's local artists, there's musicians, there's food, all of it to come together. It allows, I've met other artists that I hadn't met before, so I can now make connections there and make on different projects. It's really important for not just audiences and participants, but for the artist side of things. To meet people is really good.
Well, it's all stemmed really from the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Monte Cassino, which a lot of these soldiers that are depicted on these posters participated in, and eventually settled in Blackshire because of the demobilisation and the resettlement corps, the Polish resettlement corps that was set up by the British government. Very important part of history that people just did not know about. It's modern history. It's studied in schools, part of the national curriculum, but nobody ever. There's not that many books written. There's not that many films. There's not a lot of. If you're going to do research, there's not a lot of research either to be done, because the people that actually lived through it just did not want to talk about it. It's too harrowing from the journeys that they did and the battles that they had to fight. Yeah, and they went halfway across the world and nobody really knows. I mean, even good friends of mine are surprised. They said, "You're putting this together and your parents did this?" And I said, "Yes, they did." I said, "They didn't come here on a Boeing 747, landing at Manchester Airport and just got out and went to the camp. They travelled halfway around the world to get here." And real refugees from one compound to another that were guided either by various Allied armies or the Red Cross. Mm-hmm. And getting out of Siberia was a crucial thing when the Russians decided that they wanted to go with the Allies and against Hitler, because Hitler had attacked them. That was a crucial turning point, and the Allies realised, because they always knew they had records, not of how many people were taken to Siberia, but basically where in Siberia they went to. Well, it's been very well received. I mean, I've come to do the afternoon shift here as a volunteer, and as soon as I walked in, a gentleman came in with a Polish document, and he says, "Does anybody speak Polish?" So I said, "Well, yes, I'm not 100% perfect, but I do speak Polish." So I've got this document with me, and Google Translate will help me. And I'm going to bring it back next Saturday for you. So I walked in straight away. So it's been very well received up to now. I mean, but today's the first day it's opened, and we're open for 4 weeks, so.
I was surprised at the number of people.
Yes.
The interest shown at in 3 hours. Throughout the 3 hours, there were 50 people round about in here.